Contrary to what one might think, gliders are not light. A typical glider weighs anywhere between 3 and 600 kilograms. Before flying off in the distance, you need to take off. One common solution is the winch launch. Here we will look at the different aspects of winch launching, starting with the question, why not simply take an arrow tow? There you have the first reason. Tow planes are noisy, and those that live around the airfield rarely appreciate the noise. The second reason is cost. Tow planes are thirsty, and the fuel they consume is very expensive. Lastly, depending on the airfield, you may not have any possibility to land outside the airport boundary. Barcelonnette in the French Alps is such a case. If the glider is heavy, it can be that you're still quite low when you cross the airport boundary. If ever, at that moment, the tow plane were to lose power, a crash landing may be unavoidable. So cost, noise, and to a certain extent safety make a winch launch an attractive alternative. The glider is almost a kilometer away. You barely see it. The pilot can release the cable at any time, but in a normal winch launch, it is the winch driver who reduces the tension in the cable and triggers the auto release on the glider. The small parachute keeps a minimum of tension on the cable so that the cable can be rolled up neatly. This is our winch. It has 4 cables, so we can launch 4 gliders before we have to pull the cables back to the starter. The brown thing in the back is a homemade sound barrier. It's surprisingly effective and much appreciated by the people living in the house just on the other side of the fence. It has a large diesel engine that drives a hydraulic pump. It's the hydraulic oil that turns central axis that passes through the 4 drums on which the cables are rolled up. The winch driver selects the cable and the clutch engages the drum, which then turns. This is the view inside. It looks complicated, but it isn't really. There are 2 variables we set according to the glider type: the maximum force with which the winch will pull and the speed during the initial phase of the climb. The winch driver gives gas and the diesel engine goes from 900 to about 2000 RPM. This ensures that there is enough hydraulic pressure to launch the glider. The correct cable is selected, and then there is a last check that nobody is thermally nearby, and the winch driver makes a call on the radio to the effect that the winch launch is imminent and requests radio silence. Very carefully the cable is tightened. When tight, the speed with which the cable is pulled in is quickly increased. At the other end, the glider speeds up and takes off. The winch driver slowly decreases the speed with which the cable is pulled in, keeping the tension on the cable as stable as possible. Ideally, in the glider, the indicated airspeed stays constant. It is the winch driver who reduces the tension on the cable and causes the cable to detach itself from the glider. Once detached, the rest of the cable is rolled up on the drum. You want to be careful and stop the drum in time. If you're not, the winch will try to eat the parachute and the cable will break. Once 4 gliders have been launched, the cables need to be pulled out again. For that we use an old but robust Land Rover. Unfortunately, between the winch and the starter it's not just grass. There are some rough spots with bare soil. With time the cables wear and may break. It's not frequent, but it does happen. This is me taking off in Saint-Crepin. When the cable breaks, your first priority is to get the nose down. Then you need to wait a moment for the speed to come back, and then you decide whether to land straight ahead or to make a low altitude abbreviated circuit. You are supposed to pull the cable release, that is the yellow knob, to get rid of any cable that may still be attached to the glider. Here I was too high to land straight ahead and instead opted for an abbreviated circuit. At our field, where most starts are with the winch, the correct response to a cable break is part of the training. Here, the instructor simulated a cable break at low altitude. Nose down and straight ahead. With the stress, it has happened that the pilot fixated on the winch and headed straight for it, only to realize at the last moment that this is not a good idea. Here another simulated cable break. This time at a higher altitude, allowing an abbreviated circuit.
Oui, tu peux tendre. Oui, je tends. Voyage médiachal, silence s'il vous plaît.
the next and last part shows how to repair the cable. Probably it's interesting only for those who want to do this themselves at some point. For all others, I fully understand if you find it boring and move on and click on another video. In Schall, we now use synthetic cables, or plastic cables if you will. In the past we used steel cables, but the synthetic ones are much lighter, and as a result the glider climbs better and releases at a higher altitude. To join two ends, we first pass each cable end through the other. For this we used two needles. The silvery one is sold commercially and has a crocodile beak that can hold at the end of the cable. The copper one is homemade. After passing through a cable, you want to have at least 40 centimeters or so that sticks out. So, after passing each cable end through the other, you have two ends, each about 40 centimeters long. With a permanent marker, you make a small mark about 10 to 15 centimeters beyond the dangling bit of cable. The cables are braided. When you compress the cable, a passage opens up in the center. The copper needle is passed through. This is somewhat laborious. Let's fast forward. When the copper needle threatens to disappear, take the cable end from the cable that comes from the bottom of the screen and place it in the crocodile beak. Then shove the silver needle inside the copper one. The copper needle prevents the crocodile beak from opening. Now you can finish shoving the cable that comes from the top of the screen onto the copper needle. When you reach the black mark from the permanent marker, you let a copper needle peek out. And then make sure that at the other end the crocodile beak still holds the cable end and pull it through. The bit of cable that peeks out is debraided and then tailored. You take two strands and cut off about 6 centimeters. Then from another two strands you cut off 4 centimeters. And lastly, from yet another two strands, you take off 2 centimeters. This tailoring makes for a more smooth transition from the cable onto the section where the repair is. Now we stretch the section that we compressed, and if we took sufficient margin when making the black mark, the tailored bit disappears. Here it worked, but it was a bit tight. Later on, with the first winch launch, the tension in the cable makes it tighten around the bit of cable that is inside and will hold it in place. Now we repeat the operation for the other loose end. Okay, we have seen that. We'll fast forward towards the end. And we're done.